of the 3 podcasts based on work with 3D shapes, looking at the style of Mike Lithgow. Your final piece of work that you'll do in today's double lesson, you'll be creating a full design which might have the highlight elements that you can see in some of these designs. You could have the repeated line work and 3D shapes combining the techniques you've learnt from the podcasts in Monday's lesson. So before we do that, I want to teach you just 1 or 2 more techniques. This is a piece which I've done as a quick piece in the style of Mike Lithgow and using some extra shadows and techniques from the layers box. So this final podcast is going to show these last pieces and a suggestion of how you might go ahead to do your own piece. So on this page I've created some shapes ready to do this and put photos into some of those so that I can show you some of these extra techniques. So first thing you're going to do is think about the flat triangle shape. That's very straightforward. It's produced by just using the polygon tool very simply to make a triangle shape. Try and make a fairly symmetrical one. And then I've just chosen a pale tone of colour that fits in with my kind of general colour scheme I've been working with here, and use the bucket tool just to drop a colour tone in, and Command D to deselect that. So any straightforward shapes are like that. I'm just going to redo that because I didn't want it on the same layer, so I'm just going to go to undo move, back step. Didn't want this on the same layer as the other piece, so having got to the selection there, I'm going to create a new layer and then put the colour tone in from there. Okay. So first I'm then going to go to this triangle here, place it over the top, partly on and partly off the triangle. I just want to show you some of the drop downs on this dialog box. So if I go to linear burn, I'll get like a transparent version of my shape. If I go to vivid light, you'll see that we've got a much brighter version of the piece, and you'll notice that with some of the things on here, if there is nothing behind the shape, then you get nothing showing through because it's made it entirely transparent apart from where it overlaps a picture. Another variation is if I go to difference, different sort of effect, slightly more dense use of the colour saturation, and I think the other one it's going to click on to was multiply. Okay, and again you get a transparent effect over the piece and brighten the effect, so you can experiment with those pieces. So I'll move those back over to one side for the time being. So next thing I'm going to show you is just that idea of Mike Lithgow quite often balances one object over another and uses a drop shadow. So I'm going to take one of the circles here, I think that's that layer, yep. I'm going to change the adjustment on it by doing a hue and saturation. I can make it much brighter, see, or I can make it black and white. So that's a quick way of doing that. I want a point where it's just maybe got a bit of a retro look to it for a Mike Lithgow, so a bit of colour and largely black and white. So I'll go to that, place my circle sort of as if it's suspended over the other shape that I've created, and I'm going to layer style, and drop shadow. Okay, move the box here to where it can be seen, and you can see from here we can get the quite a diffuse layer. Put your shadow from different directions, and that's above, so I want it probably fairly well pointing straight down. I want the spread quite wide, but I could have it more diffuse, and I could have the size much narrower, but again I want it fairly wide and diffuse, and I could change the opacity to being lighter or darker on here. So adjust that to how you want it. Okay, going to move my ball there above the other layer so that it casts its shadow down here a bit onto the shape as well. And I could choose that selection area and put the drop shadow directly into there, but that will create the idea of the tone and shadow. So the next thing we'll just have a look at now is on this example. I've started applying some of these ideas. Just make that a little bit bigger. Building up my stack shape for this particular piece that I want. The other thing which Mike Lithgow has in a lot of his pictures is, let's bring that in. Is that the final? That's the final. The 3D shaped letters quite often, and also then the polygon tools around the outside edge. So I'll show you a couple of things which are going to bring in that final stage. Okay, minimize that. So the 3D shape, in fact I'll show you that on here. If I pull in my 3D shapes there, which are created just by using extrude and bevel, put that onto there, move them up to the top. And another effect I was just going to show you is the luminosity. If I see if that's that ball, if I bring this one over the top of here, again sliding that above, everything, luminosity, again on this drop down box, has a sort of magnifying effect over the top of things like your 3D lettering. So that's quite an interesting technique to use with Mike Lithgow. Okay, so let's lose that and go to this last section. There we go. There. So for this design, just to put the background on here, I'm going to click into the background there, using the polygon tool again, so like you did with the triangle, and again make sure this is on a new layer. Pick the colour tone. I'm going to pick a grey off here because I want it a light tone that's going to tone in but allow everything to stand out from the back. And then take the next section. Again, can do this on the same layer as the previous one. Doesn't have to be all completely different. Take that section, change your colour, drop that in with the paint bucket. And then another thing with Mike Lithgow, sometimes you want like a contrasting piece, or you might want a 3D shape shooting across the background. For this, just for now, I will just do a piece here, which is a narrower bit. It's not quite picked up. And pick a purpley tone and drop that in using the bucket again, and so on. So you can go all the way around until you've created your whole background shape. Put in any 3D letters that you want. So let's say your task today is to produce something which is using the techniques you've learnt. You could have 3D shapes going across the piece. You could explore the rounder shapes. These highlighted dots are just created by using a white dot on the brush and then a layer style and a drop down for the adjustments, which is under layer again.